Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ballhawk Sports Podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. We have another episode based around the Major League Baseball season. Now, we've got about 2 weeks into the season now. We've seen a lot happen. Some trends are starting to show. Some eyes are starting to get widened. But I do want to start with probably the biggest news to come out in the last week, and that is the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. contract extension. He got a 14-year, $500 million extension from the Blue Jays, which is about around what he was expected to get. The big news for me about this extension is that $325 million of that is a signing bonus, meaning that he gets it now, basically. And there are no deferrals, so all the money will get paid out within the 14 years of the contract. And the signing bonus being so high is similar to the Ohtani contract in the fact that all the deferrals made the contract cheaper. Well, the signing bonus also makes the contract cheaper because essentially they paid him one check of $325 million right now, and then he'll get the other $175 million over the next 14 years, making it essentially a like $12-13 million a year contract from this year on. The Blue Jays do have a very well-off owner amongst compared to the other owners in baseball. So they are one of the teams that, as it's shown from their high-profile, unsuccessful pursuits of guys like Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto over the last two off seasons, they have the cash basis, the owner does, to be able to chase these big free agents, and they should continue to have the cash basis to sign big free agents. So they have the ability, unlike some other teams, to cut him a check for $325 million, which sounds insane, but guys with this kind of money just live in a completely different atmosphere than we do. Congratulations to Vladimir Guerrero. He gets to stay in Toronto where he's wanted to stay. He's come out in statements and said that he's very happy to remain with the team. And this very clearly was a situation where he just wanted his worth, and he wanted his worth from the Blue Jays, which I know I expected, and I think a lot of other people also did expect, that was going to be the likely outcome anyway. It was really just a matter of, honestly, if he was going to go to free agency and throw like the Mets and the Yankees and the Red Sox money at the Toronto Blue Jays and be like, look, I can get this contract, you can just sign it to me. And so he got the money that he wanted, which the Blue Jays desperately need. If they had let him go and let Bo go in the offseason with their pitching also getting up there in age, it would have been a problem. And then on top of that, Anthony Santander, their big free agency signing from this past offseason, not working out too great. So they're going to have a lot more moves to do. Like I said, Bo Bichette's still going to be a free agent. An extension is not expected for him, and it's actually, I believe, expected that he will leave. He will leave them. So, we'll see what happens. They don't exactly have a shortstop ready-made to come in. Now, they did just acquire Andres Jimenez over the offseason. He plays a platinum glove second base, so they could move him to short and see how that works out. But that's for the offseason to talk about. For now, Blue Jays fans get to be excited, and Vladimir Guerrero gets incredibly well paid. But now that we've gone through that, let's get into the injury roundup for this week. I want to start it off with another player that got a contract extension last week. That's Jackson Merrill, the center fielder for the Padres. He pulled his right hamstring. He's got a right hamstring strain. He was put on the 10-day IL when the hamstring didn't respond well over the weekend. They're just giving him rest, and they want to ensure that it's not going to be a year-long problem. So it's not expected to keep him out for too long. So even a possibility he could return right after the 10 days, but it'll really be about how the rest helps that hamstring heal. But I don't even think they gave it a grade. So as we'll get into later on the grades for muscle strains and pulls, it doesn't seem to be serious or long term, and they're just being extremely precautious, as teams are known to do this early in the season. But another player that had a hamstring pull is Matt McClain, the Reds second baseman. He pulled his hamstring as well. Similar situation to Jackson Merrill. They put him on the IL after they held him out of a bunch of games, and they decided because they held him out. He played Saturday. He kind of played Saturday. He didn't play Sunday. He didn't play into the early days of the week, and then they ended up putting him on the IL retrospective to last Saturday. So he'll be eligible to return, and he's expected to return once the 10 days has expired, which I believe is like Tuesday or Wednesday next week. So look to get him back at that point. Now, an unfortunate injury was Ivan Herrera, the Cardinals catcher. He's expected to be out at least 4 weeks with a bone bruise in his left knee. The tests that they ran on it did come back negative for structural damage, so it's not anything worse. He did tweak his knee running the bases, but he's expected to miss at least 4 weeks as he recovers from that bone bruise. But moving on to some pitchers that are having some issues. Spencer Arrighetti, a starting pitcher for the Astros, having a good start to the year. He has a fractured right thumb that will not require surgery. He's going to be in a cast for about 2 to 3 weeks before they recheck to see the progress. And the anticipation is that he's out for around 6 weeks. Now that, of course, is if the thumb reacts well to being in the cast for the 2 to 3 weeks, then around 6 weeks is their timeline. If it doesn't react well, they could look back into surgery options, which would then keep him out for probably another at least 6 to 8 weeks. Zach Eflin, the Orioles starting pitcher, he has a left lat strain. Now, if you listen to last week's episode, if you know anything about lat strains for pitchers are very troublesome. So it could keep him out for a few weeks. They're currently projecting that he might be able to return if it's not as bad. It's not as bad as some other people have had, like Sean Manaea from the Mets. So they're expected that he will be able to return either the end of this month, beginning of next month. But like I've said in the past, lat strains are very tricky, so you got to keep that. You got to treat that with some kid gloves there. But another pitcher, Nestor Cortez, the Brewers starting pitcher, he had a platelet-rich plasma injection, which is the same process that, or the same procedure that Sean Manaea had on his lat. Now, Cortez had it in his left elbow that was acting up after his last start. If you remember at the end of last season when he was a Yankee and the season was coming to an end, he had some left elbow discomfort that led him to missing most of the playoffs and the last like week or two of the season. So it's possible that it's related to that. It could just be some general arm fatigue, but because he did get the injection, I think that there was probably some more adept inflammation. That was the word I was looking for, inflammation, than was initially expected. So, we'll see where it goes from there. But he has an unclear timetable to return. They want to get him on a throwing program before they, start to set a return date and do rehab starts and stuff like that. But getting into some players that had some other injuries in the position player realm. We have Mark Canha, the outfielder DH for the Royals. He hit an outfield wall trying to make a catch. He has a left abductor strain. His return timetable is unclear. That just happened a few days ago. I assume they'll rest. They'll run some tests, and then his timetable to recover will become more clear. So I might try to touch on that next week. But for now, he is on the 10-day IL, and the Royals will be without him for at least those 10 days, but probably around a month, I would think, with how they've been acting, maybe a little bit less. But good news for Dodgers fans. Freddie Freeman, first baseman, he missed all of last week with an ankle injury. He will be activated tomorrow, come off the IL and return for them to start their Friday series. And then bad news, or good and bad news for Cubs fans. Their starting pitcher, Justin Steele, who had a great start, and we'll get into that later, he was put on the IL. He's expected to need a minimum 15 days with left elbow tendonitis. Now, this is interesting because he missed 3 weeks last season with a similar injury. So obviously, he came out and said he's only expected to need the minimum, so it's really just a rest. He'll probably throw some bullpens in between and stuff like that to keep himself ready. But it's not expected to be as bad as it was last week, so hopefully his elbow responds the way that it is expected to and the way he expects it to, and they're able to, he misses 3 starts and then comes back, or he misses 2 starts and then comes back. that's best case scenario for Steele there, especially when you see a left elbow issue come up for a lefty starting pitcher. But moving on to Wyatt Langford, the outfielder for the Rangers, having a great start to the season, but he was put on the 10-day IL with a right oblique strain. His timetable is unclear, but Langford did say that when he came into the locker room after getting put on the IL, that he was feeling pretty good. So I don't think it's expected that he'll just spend the minimum 10 days, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that he misses like just 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, and then comes back in like 14 to 18 days, something like that. But another soft tissue injury is Ketel Marte, second baseman for the Diamondbacks. He has a left hamstring strain. It is a grade 1. Which if you're not familiar with, grade 1 is the least severe. Grade 3 would be the most severe. So while he is expected to miss several weeks, it could have been a lot worse. He did this after collecting a hit in one of the games over the weekend. So, for a guy that just signed a contract extension, again, not the best thing. You don't like soft tissue injuries to begin with just because you never know, but some of them can be avoidable. So you like to think that he bounces back from this very well and only misses the few weeks that he is supposed to miss. But another player that is out with the hamstring strain is Pablo Lopez, who was pulled from his last start with the right hamstring strain. He is expected to hit the IL, although it has not been official. They're kind of giving him time to be able to bounce back potentially on his own. And with that, they're probably going to wait until his turn in the rotation comes up again. If he's not ready, they put him on the IL retrospective. He'll miss that start plus one more and come back at the end of the 15 days. But there is still a very small chance that he does pitch in his next start. They're just, playing the wait and see game. But one of the pitchers that did get on the IL is Blake Snell for the Dodgers. He is shut down from throwing until at least Monday. It's a shoulder injury, and they just expect rest to be able to get through it. If you have followed Blake Snell's career, he does have a lot of injury history in his past. So the Dodgers playing it safe with their high-priced free agency signing from this past offseason makes a little sense. They have plenty of pitching, and they have someone coming back very soon that I will get into in a little bit. So nothing major. Like, they're not even really treating the shoulder. They're just giving it rest and then allowing him to start a pitching program back up that will get him ready to make his start probably at the end of the 15 days that he is required to spend out there. Now, one of the big moments from last week was the Victor Robles catch out in right field for the Mariners. He did on that play. He has a small fracture in his left shoulder, and he is expected to miss a minimum of 12 weeks. This is very unfortunate for a player who really was having a career resurrection last year when he signed with Seattle after getting cut by the Nationals, where he was having some trouble living up to the hype that he had as a prospect. But he signed with the Mariners after getting cut, like I said, and then he had a really good year after that, and he ended up getting like a 3-year, $18 million extension. So it was really nice to see. He plays really good defense. He's got a solid bat as well. So it was nice to see him get successful, and hopefully he has a good recovery and is only needed to miss the minimum 12 weeks. But the last guy I want to talk about here is Jake Rogers, the catcher for the Tigers. He has an oblique injury. He's expected to be out at least a month. This is a big deal because he is the only person he's the only person to have caught Skubal all of last season. So actually since September of 2023, I think was the last time Skubal didn't throw to Rogers. So if you're a Tigers fan, something to keep an eye on, although Dingler did do a good job in Skubal's most recent start. Since Rogers went on the IL over the weekend. So, something to keep an eye on. I'm sure Skubal will be fine, but just something to note. And then I have a number of players that started their rehab assignment last week. I'm going to just run through them really fast. So I apologize for not getting into more detail, but these are guys that are on varying forms of their rehab assignment, but they did just go on them in the last week or so, and some of them are trying to come back, but I'll get into that. So starting off, we have Liam Hendrickson. He's with the AAA team with the Red Sox, a relief pitcher. He's expected to be back very shortly. I believe he's worked a few innings now down there, so you could see him back this weekend or next week, I think, at the latest. Cade Cavalli is a starting pitcher for the Nationals. He just threw like a 2 inning or something similar to that rehab start. It is expected that he is going to have a lengthier rehab recovery or process because he's recovering from a major surgery. And then it is also probable that he'll get optioned to AAA to try to, rediscover himself, as he had just made his major league debut before he got hurt when he was last seen. So Nationals fans don't expect to have him back immediately, but probably a month or two, he might be ready to get called up by to the majors, which will be nice to see because he's got some potential. But next up is Clark Schmidt, starting pitcher for the Yankees. He actually just had his most recent start. I believe he went like 4 innings, had 7 Ks, something similar to that. But that it was expected to be his last rehab start, so he is expected to rejoin the Yankees rotation at some point, either over the weekend or early next week. But someone else who's close to returning is Tobias Myers, for the starting pitcher for the Brewers. He also just had a rehab start, which was expected to be one of his last. He went 3 1/3, I believe it was, and pitched pretty well for the Brewers minor league system down there. So expect to see him possibly need another rehab start, but he might just get called up to the major league team with the amount of injuries that they had hit. That might just be something that happens. But we'll see what happens. But someone else that might be returning soon is Blaze Alexander. He's a second baseman, shortstop kind of utility player for the Diamondbacks. He is on rehab assignment. They'll be happy to have him back to be able to fill in for Ketel Marte. I would expect him back sometime next week. Probably when I believe he's only played a few games, so it'll be good for them to have him back. Some position flexibility and some extra coverage for Ketel Marte being out. But one of the big guys coming back from injury is Zach Neto, the shortstop for the Angels. If you didn't follow Neto last year, he had a really good breakout year last year. He had like 20 homers, 20 stolen bases, batted like 270, something like that. Like he had a really good year. I believe he had over 4 WAR, playing some good defense at shortstop too. And he's tearing it up down there on the minor league circuit in the rehab assignment. So I probably would peg him. If he's not activated Friday, I'd probably think he gets activated Monday. So Angels fans, look out for that. The Twins might have some reinforcements coming in, as Brooks Lee is on a rehab assignment looking to get back. He was battling for the second base job with some guys like Eddie Julian out there. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that he'll get some run. The Twins aren't hitting the best to start the season, especially Julian. So I think he'll get some run with the major league team once he is deemed healthy. But the Phillies have Ranger Suarez as starting pitcher coming back from injury on rehab assignment. I believe he needs another rehab start as well. So we'll see what happens there, but he is pitching well. They are expected him to be back shortly, likely to take the spot of Taijuan Walker, which didn't have a good year last year, but he has rebounded nicely this year with two decent to good starts. But another player that is going to be shortly returning in the NL East is Francisco Alvarez, the catcher for the Mets. He is on his rehab assignment. He is getting back, catching some full games and stuff like that. So it'll be nice to see him get back, probably sometime next week. But until then, they'll have to keep making do with what they've been doing at catcher. But the next guy, really nice to see him coming back. It's Lance McCullers Jr., the starting pitcher for the Astros. He's only throwing like 35, 40 pitches in his rehab right now. But just seeing him do that's really good. He hasn't thrown a pitch in the majors in like 2 full seasons because he got hurt, and then in his recovery he got hurt again. So he was a really good pitcher last time he had a full season to pitch. So the Astros will welcome him back with open arms, and hopefully he can prove that he's still got that potential in his arm. But moving on to someone else with a lot of potential, Edward Cabrera, starting pitcher for the Marlins. He actually, while being on rehab, he joined the Marlins in New York for their series with the Mets, but he did not pitch. So it is unknown whether he'll go back on rehab assignment or if he'll just get activated and make a start, sometime this weekend. They don't know what's going to happen there yet, but their options are open, but he did have a rehab start over the last week. And then another person that's coming close to returning is Alexis Diaz, relief pitcher for the Reds. Now, while he is close to returning, it is not expected that he will just get handed the closer role out there in Cincinnati. They have had some issues out there, but Diaz has had some issues too. He had a bad year last year. Control issues have been a problem. He's been walking too many guys, getting up too many homers. And that continued in spring training. So it'll be interesting to see what Terry Francona decides to do once Diaz is healthy. But that does look to be something that's going to be happening soon. Another player coming back shortly for the Reds is Andrew Abbott. He's a starting pitcher for the Reds out there in Cincinnati. He had a rehab start. It is expected that he will be joining them, I believe, this weekend. So that'll be nice to see out there in Cincinnati. But staying in the NL Central, we have Brandon Woodruff, starting pitcher for the Brewers. Now, he had a tiny setback in his recovery from shoulder surgery the previous year that kept him out the whole season last year. But he has progressed from sim games, where I believe he threw around like 40, 50 pitches, to getting on a rehab assignment this weekend. So keep an eye out if you're a Brewers fan, or if you're just a fan of Brandon Woodruff, because he was a very good pitcher last time he was healthy. Being able to come back, make his rehab starts. He'll probably need close to the full allotment of time that you're allowed on rehab assignment, which I believe is 21 days. So it'll be interesting to see. He'll probably need the full thing, which will give him, 4 starts down there roughly. But that means that he's coming back within the next month, which is really good for Brewers fans who need starting pitchers helps. And then the last 2 guys I have are both Dodgers. Evan Phillips is on rehab assignment and is expected to be back shortly. He's a relief pitcher. And then Tony Gonsolin, a starting pitcher for the Dodgers, is expected to come back shortly. He recently had a rehab start with AAA. I believe it was his second rehab start, actually. So I could expect that he would take Blake Snell's spot in the rotation next time it comes up, but not 100% sure. That's just speculation, so we'll see what happens. But he is on the mend, and he is getting close to be fully built up. But that is the end of our injury wrap-ups. Folks, now we are going to head to our standout performers for the last week, starting us off with the young phenom Jackson Chourio, outfielder for the Brewers. He had 4 homers, 14 RBIs, 9 runs, and a stolen base over the last week, really busting off the rust that he had in the first couple series. So really good to see him recover his form, as he is one of the hot ticket young players in the majors right now. And really good for the Brewers that they have some power, which is something that they've needed for years. So he continues his quest to try to get 30-30, like I think that he will. But speaking of power, Pete Alonso, the first baseman for the Mets, he really brought it last week, hitting 4 homers, 11 RBIs, 5 runs. He is a big driving force of that offense. He bats behind Lindor and Soto, so he really has to drive them in. So it's imperative that at the very least he hits well with runners in scoring position, which with Lindor and Soto in front of him, he will have a lot of opportunities to do so. So seeing him hit the 4 bombs, get the 11 RBIs, really good to see if you're a Mets fan. Especially when Vlad Guerrero Jr., you can't dream about that anymore. So Pete Alonso's your guy. But Rafael Devers, the DH for the Red Sox, he did snap out of his early season slump. He only 1 home run, but he did have 8 RBIs, 8 runs, and he was batting like 400 in the last week. So really good to see him bounce back and recover. It was an interesting situation where it was like, is it a mental thing? Is it like, what is it? Because some people can't make the transition to being a full-time DH smoothly. So it's nice to see him get into a groove. He even went 4 for 5 one game. Like, just getting into a groove and being able to I guess prove to himself more than anything that he can do this DH thing, because it's expected that Bregman gets third base the whole year. Christian Campbell is going to get second or center field if some guys are missing games. So he's not expected to have a position on the field unless at the trade deadline Tristan Casas gets moved, but I don't think that he has the value that some people make him out to have. So, that's neither here nor there. But for now, he is the full-time DH, and he is showing that he can adjust to that position well. But another superstar that had a good week, Corbin Carroll, outfielder for the Diamondbacks, picking up the slack for Ketel Marte, who's down with an injury. He had 4 homers himself with 5 RBIs and 8 runs scored. When he is on for that Diamondbacks offense, it's just different because he has a different level of speed. He's led the league in triples the last 2 years. So him being fully healthy and being able to put up stats and be the driving force for that offense out there in Arizona is a huge difference maker. His speed alone is one thing, but if he's hitting for power the way that he's been hitting this year so far, look out, because part of the issue that he had last year was that shoulder injury, and if he's hitting for power, then he's about fine, and he hasn't even started stealing bases yet. So, if you're out there in the NL West, look out. But my big surprise from the last week is actually just a player coming into his own. Young Kyron Paris, the second baseman center fielder for the Angels. He is 23 years old. In his first full season in the majors, he had 4 homers, 5 RBIs, 6 runs, and a stolen base over the last week. He is really proving that he deserves a spot, and he has guys on social media pulling for him to get more playing time. Like, he's really showing that he deserves a shot, and for an Angels team showing some signs of life, as we'll get into in a second. It's really nice to see that they're able to find a guy like Paris that is just a jolt of energy, something the team needs, and something the team can rally around. So good on him. Hopefully he can keep it up for the full season and really blossom into a really good player for the Angels, as his athleticism shows that he can. But moving on to the pitchers, I have 3 guys that had 2 really good starts and 2 guys that had 1 good start over the last week. Starting us off is Max Fried, starting pitcher for the Yankees. He just had a great game, going 7 innings, getting 11 Ks against the Tigers to help them salvage that last game of the series. But over his last 2 starts, he's had 12 and 2/3 innings, 17 Ks, 11 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk, and he did get wins in both of those games. Really nice to see him be the Yankees stopper, and hopefully he can continue to prove that he is a top-level pitcher, which he is, and he is deserving of that contract that they just signed him to. But a young player really proving that he is taking a next step is Hunter Green, starting pitcher for the Reds, who, for I believe it was like the 2nd or 3rd time in his career, pitched into the 8th and 9th inning. He had a start where he went 8 2/3 innings, and then just kind of lost it at the end, ran out of steam. It was nice to see him keep his pitch count down, because normally that's his problem. He walks too many guys, he doesn't have the control. But if he has the control that he showed in that game, look out, because he's going to be a problem. But in his 2 starts, he had 15 2/3 innings, 15 Ks, 7 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks. He did unfortunately take a tough game loss in his first start in the last week. But he did get the win in the 8 2/3. They were able to come in, the bullpen and clean up what was left. So, good on him. Hopefully he can keep showing that talent that has always been evident with him. But our last pitcher that had 2 starts last week that were impressive was Cole Reagan, starting pitcher for the Royals. 11 innings pitched, 21 strikeouts, 9 hits, 2 earned run, 2 walks. Now, I will say, he's not going very deep into games, which you would like to see from a top-level pitcher, especially if he has aspirations to win the Cy Young. It's great that he has 21 strikeouts, but in 11 innings, I'm like, is he chasing the strikeout? He doesn't have a lot of walks. 2 walks in 11 innings is good, but he's got to keep his pitch count down, which will enable him to pitch deeper into games. But strikeout maestro out there in Kansas City for them. But another pitcher who had a great start last week was Spencer Schwellenbach, starting pitcher for the Braves. Now, if you haven't heard of Spencer Schwellenbach, you need to look him up. He had a great second half last season, filling in for some injuries for the Braves in the starting rotation. And he is answering back with a vengeance this year. He had a great spring training. He's having a great start to the season. This most recent start was on the 4th versus Miami. He went 8 innings, gave up 2 hits, 10 Ks, no walks, no runs, just complete dominance from a young pitcher, and helping to try to dig the Braves out of the hole that they dug for themselves. And now, really, the big Iron Man from this week Justin Steele, starting pitcher for the Cubs, in the game that he got hurt on the 7th, he went 7 innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, 8 Ks, no earned runs, and got the W. So good on him being able to battle through that injury and finish off the game for his Cubs versus a good Rangers team. But now I want to move on to our hot and not segment. Starting us off with the teams that were hot over the last week. The Detroit Tigers took 2 of 3 from the Yankees and swept the White Sox in 3 over the weekend. So good on them going 5-1 over the last 2 series and really being able to separate them from the pack because everyone in the Central last week went 2-4. So, getting that separation is good for them, and they beat a good Yankees team after taking care of business versus a bad team in the White Sox. But moving on to the Texas Rangers, they only took 1 of 3 from the Cubs, but they did sweep 3 games versus the Rays. So they went 4-2, which is a good week for them, helping to separate them from the pack in the West. But someone trying to keep chase with them and coming back to Paris, the Los Angeles Angels have taken 1 of 2 games from the Rays. They have game 3 of the series today or tonight. And they took 2 of 3 from the Guardians over the weekend. They are in second place in the West. I know it's early, but it's nice to see that they're coming out of the gate hot and they're performing well. And they're winning games, which is good for Mike Trout because he deserves some more playoff time, let me tell you. But another team out in the National League now, heading over there, the Mets swept 3 games from the Blue Jays over the weekend, and then during the week took 2 of 3 from the Marlins. So they also went 5-1, similar to the Tigers, and they're helping themselves keep pace with the Phillies, who had a good first week and they had an above average week last week. But good for the Mets. Hopefully they can keep it up. It's really on their pitching to be able to keep them in games, which they did versus the Blue Jays, but their pitching lacks high-level talent. Now, some of it, they'll get some people back from injury, but, they got to keep taking care of business and keep on keeping on. But another team, 2 teams in the NL Central that had a good week, actually. The Chicago Cubs took 2 of 3 from a good Rangers team and then 2 of 3 from a great Padres team. Really good on them being able to get that done. The Padres are showing they're a good team this year. They're playing hot out of the gate. So taking 2 or 3 from them over the weekend, a good sign. And then the Rangers, very similar. They're a good team. So taking 2 or 3 from them pretty convincingly, actually, as well. Always a good sign. And then the Brewers really rebounding well from a rough first week of the season. They've won their 2 games over the Rockies, with the 3rd game happening tonight. And then last week, over the weekend, they took 3 of 4 from the Reds. So beating divisional opponent 3 out of 4 times, always good. And then being able to, they're really combining good hitting with good enough pitching right now as they're trying to get through their injuries. And Freddie Peralta pitching phenomenally. Hopefully he can keep it up for the whole year and look to maybe get in on the conversation for Cy Young. But now let's move on to our knots. Our knots this week start off with the Baltimore Orioles, who only took 1 of 3 from the Diamondbacks and then also did the same from the Royals over the weekend. So they went 2-4. Not a good place, especially in a division where if the Blue Jays play well, if the Red Sox play well, if the Yankees play well, they could get behind the 8 ball really fast. They have some injuries to their pitching staff, which doesn't help them out. Eflin just went on the IL. Grayson Rodriguez is still trying to come back from his injury in spring training. So they're kind of treading water in the pitching side. They did get Gunnar Henderson back, which should help them offensively. But we'll see what happens. They gotta bounce back from that. But the White Sox really showed us that they are the White Sox still. They lost 2 games versus the Guardians. Their 3rd game is tonight. They were swept by the Tigers over the weekend. So, a young team that's a young team. It's being a young team. They pitch decently. Their pitchers have some issues with command, but Shane Smith had a nice start. I believe Sean Burke had a nice start over the weekend before having a little bit of a rough go of it today or yesterday. So we'll see where they go there. Really, like I've said in the past, it's more about young players progress than wins for this team. They just don't want to, once again set the record for wins. That's for losses. That's not what you want to do. But another team that could potentially get to 100 losses this year, the Rockies lost 2 games versus the Brewers, with their third one happening today. And they only took 1 of 3 from the Athletics over the weekend. They're a team that, they have some decent pitching. I am a fan of Herman Marquez, who's coming off of injury and pitching pretty well so far this season. I think Kyle Freeland has his moments. Anthony Senzatella, he also has his moments, but there's a lot of injury risk there. There's a lot of the Colorado effect there. And then really the problem for them so far is that their offense isn't hitting to the clip that they're supposed to. Doyle had a breakout game, but he wasn't really hitting well before that. Tovar's been okay. Taglia's not starting off well. And they've had some other issues, although Hunter Goodman's been playing well for them at catcher. But they did just call up Zach Veen, hopefully to give them a jolt out there in the outfield. And we'll see what happens. They're not expected to be a good team, so this isn't like the White Sox. This isn't terrible. You just want to see more from their young players continuing to improve. But the last team that we have for our knots is the Rays, who have taken 1 of 2 from the Angels after getting swept by the Rangers. The good thing about the Rays, they are playing a lot of close games, which makes sense considering they have good pitching despite their injuries, with McClanahan being out so far this year. They have a good bullpen. They always do. And then they have good starting pitching as well. The starting pitching sometimes does have problems going deep into games, which then taxes the bullpen, and it's just a snowball effect. But they're playing a lot of like 1-run, 2-run games where, save opportunities abound for both teams. And that's kind of what happens when you pitch well and you don't play the best offense. So we'll see what happens. They need some guys to come back from injury. Like I said, McClanahan. They also have Josh Lowe, who's out in the outfield. He's on IL as well. So hopefully those guys can recover fast, get the Rays back to winning. But before we go, I'm going to look ahead to this next week. I got 3 games for the weekend and then 3 games for the weekdays next week. Starting us off with the Cubs go to Los Angeles to visit the Dodgers. It'll be a really nice rematch from the Tokyo series. And then just, the Cubs having a good start to the season, the Dodgers, being the Dodgers, that should be some good series over the weekend, as well as some good pitching matchups as well. But we also have the Rangers at the Mariners, some AL West action over in Seattle. Great pitching matchups abound, as you will typically see with the Seattle Mariners and them having a great pitching staff. But Julio Rodriguez having a good start to the year, Jorge Polanco having a good start to the year, Randy Arozarena just had a great game, which is nice to see. So those should be some good games, some good, tight, close games out there in Seattle. But the last series over the weekend that I'm looking forward to is the Braves at the Rays. Now, really, this is all about how the Braves offense responds to the Rays pitching. I think my opinion is that the Braves have been playing bad offensive baseball. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to the Rays pitching staff. And really outside of that, there's nothing to note about the series in general. It's an interleague or it's an interconference game, so there's nothing really, at play there. But they'll get to play in Tampa where it's warmer, as some of the games up north aren't as warm. So that'll be nice, and hopefully their offense can respond to the good pitching the Rays have. But the 3 series that I'm looking forward to during the week is the Giants at the Phillies Monday to Thursday next week. So a 4-game series in Philadelphia. The Giants are having a great start to the season, and the Phillies atop of the NL East so far this year. It'll be really good. Some good pitching matchups there. With Logan Webb, Jordan Hicks, Justin Verlander for the Giants, and then you got Zach Wheeler, Jesus Luzardo, Aaron Nola, and those guys. So that'll be a good matchup. You also have a rematch of the ALDS last year as the Royals go to Yankee Stadium Monday to Wednesday and take on the Yankees. It'll be nice to see how the Yankees respond to the Royals pitching staff, as they have some lefties that could give the Yankees some problems in Bubic, and who's having a phenomenal start to the season. Bubic is. And then Reagans, who also could potentially shut them down, as the Yankees have had some issues with some lefties this year. And then my last series to look ahead to for the week next week is the Cubs at the Padres. Really rough week for the Cubs. And I think we're really going to come out of next week looking at the Cubs and being like, okay, they look legit so far. Or, they run into a little bit of rough patch. So, Cubs, Padres, good pitching matchups, similar to the Dodgers. Good matchups in San Diego. And we'll get to see how the Cubs fare in their little West Coast trip out there, getting to play two of the top teams out there in the NL West. But that is the episode for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you enjoyed, please subscribe or follow me on social media. And I will see you guys next week.